We've got a couple of guys coming in from the UK, from Hudson Architects. This will be the first of 3 presentations that we'll see today. We've allotted about 30 minutes for the presentation and another 30 minutes or so for question and answer between the architecture firms and the jury. For those of you attending in just watch mode, you may see a few screens, a few faces on the screen. There are 4 members of the jury here in the room with me. My name is Trace Cooper. I'm the mayor of Atlantic Beach. Along with me have Danny Navy, who's one of our town councilmen, M.A. Allen, who is a renowned interior designer based in Raleigh, but who has a second home in Atlantic Beach, and Fred Bond, who is the developer who owns a lot of the land around the boardwalk, and who's been a great partner in everything we've done down there, including this. And then the other members of the jury that are coming in remotely are Patrick Hobgood, an architect with Hobgood Architects, and Marjorie Hodges with Art Suite. So we've all kind of introduced ourselves to the folks from Hudson prior to the start of this. And now that everybody's online, I'll turn it over, Lewis, I'll turn it over to you. We're excited that a project in little old North Carolina caught your attention, and we look forward to seeing what you've got for us.
Great, thank you very much. I'm Lewis Williams, and this is Jack. We both work for UK-based studio Hudson Architects. We entered this competition because I found the brief super exciting. We as a practice love community-focused projects and find fulfillment in working for the public, generating new urban spaces, experiences, and opportunities through design. I'm sure you've had many international entries to this exciting competition, and we're super happy to have been shortlisted. Our proposal acknowledges the boardwalk as a staple urban feature along beachfronts the world over, a cosmopolitan collection of attractions positively fight for the visitor's attention. Our proposal looks to further encourage the already vibrant beachfront of Atlantic Beach. We'll start by going through a little bit of context about our kind of research and where we kind of formulated our ideas. We really enjoyed the nostalgic collection of historic photographs, which were set out in the brief. They really set the scene of Atlantic Beach as a destination for both relaxation and leisure. Colourful, vibrant graphics, bold type, textured and patterned elements litter the facades of the colourful buildings, very much for their age. We've taken elements of each, and as you will see, have reimagined these in a contemporary language that has its roots in the vibrant history of the location. We've begun by looking at the site itself and at the history of the area. The area in white shown here highlights or defines the site boundary that we're working with and indicates the 2 dominant nodal points within the existing boardwalk, those being bathhouse and the historic kind of pavilion area. These then being connected by a route that allows visitors to filter out down onto the sand. We acknowledge 2 access points, with the historic pavilion area being the most dominant in the central position. Informal connections are then made to the sandy grassland opposite. We'll now take you through our kind of design process and how we kind of got to our proposal. So going through our process, we've acknowledged the linear route of the existing boardwalk, which we know provides a convenient route along the front, both for casual walking and some of the community events. We've used this as a basis in which to locate new accommodation, allowing visitors to use this linear route and discover the varied spaces as they move along it. We've then mirrored the form of the lapping waves, which allows new accommodation to be located at the centre of each. This generates a series of nodes along the linear route of different sizes to suit the various uses. The red areas here highlight the kind of boardwalk area that we propose, and then the green areas are the activity and the accommodation in which we propose to provide. The plan is of course naturally centred on the pavilion, reintroduction of which will be the landmark structure of the scheme and form the public gathering space during peak times and larger events. A small plaza has been laid out to the north, creating a sense of arrival to the beachfront. At each end, the scheme features a nodal point, So to the west is the bathhouse and accompanying splash pool, which we imagine as a busy, family-friendly play space. To the west end, we have the much quieter protected garden featuring a series of smaller, much quieter spaces. Between these, we have animated the boardwalk with spaces for public art, activity, and respite. And I'd now like to take us on a tour of our proposal. We begin at the entrance, a small plaza that creates a sense of excitement upon arrival. In between, Instagrammable style space that lets the public, both physical and virtual, know that you are here at Atlantic Beach. Here we show a tunnel, but this could equally be used as a space for an interactive public artwork of any kind. Moving forward, we immediately arrive at the pavilion. Just like the historic art examples seen in many of the really nice historic photographs, we wish this to become the cultural centre of the reimagined beachfront, a lively meeting space central to the community's activities. Here we've shown how the pavilion can kind of be adapted. It's a space for kind of different uses depending on the kind of events that you'd like to hold. Top we've shown maybe it's a kind of lecture space or community talks, community events that people can sit under the covered space. Again, using the same kind of approach, we've shown market stalls, craft fairs, something that showcases the kind of perhaps the quality of local craftsmanship or kind of small businesses. And then we can also use the pavilion as a space for music events or a cinema in which the crowd then uses the sandy space in front, and obviously the bands take place within the covered space, much like a kind of general bandstand typology, really. Linking each node together is the boardwalk itself, designed to provide opportunities to rest, relax, and appreciate the view of the ocean. Inspired by the traditional wave wall, where the public naturally finds themselves sat in a line enjoying their ice creams, the boundary condition features a continuous bench interspersed by nooks to afford wheelchair users the same great experience. A timber lamella screen forms the boundary treatment, allowing the residents' views out, but largely preventing views into private space by the public. Small-scale hardy planting softens the appearance and defines smaller, personal spaces at beach level. Set into the decking, small concrete pavers give information at key points around the proposal, providing an additional layer to the boardwalk experience. This kind of illustration on the right-hand side here looks at how we might propose in constructing this. So small kind of concrete piles are set into a sub-base layer with a timber structure then placed over top. This is one of the views of one of the kind of shaded areas, something I'll come on to late and explain later. We now move over to the west of the scheme, sorry, to the bathhouse and the splash pool. This vibrant area is designed for family and fun. Children play in the fountains whilst their parents watch over them, all to the backdrop of the sea. Central is the undulating artificial landscape of the splash pool, which mimics the sandy dunes and surrounds a small play park and trampoline space. Loungers and seating surround the perimeter, allowing parents to watch over their kids whilst they play. A circular timber structure that features easily accessible clean water showers externally and toilets, washroom and lockers internally. Benches are dotted around, provide space to rest and reconvene after a long day on the beach, and planting provides privacy from the nearby car park. This view is a view of the bathhouse and trampoline space, and you kind of got benches here on the left with small elements of planting. And then the lounger space with shading above looking out over the ocean. To the west end now, and we find the far quieter garden area. Shielded from the wind, planted mounds define meandering pathways and more intimate spaces. Centered to this is a sandy amphitheatre for small group discussion or even morning yoga with a view. So here we're kind of seeing some of the shading devices. We know from our feedback from the earlier scheme that large palm trees that we previously hoped would offer some kind of shade might not be appropriate for the location. So what we've done is use these pergola structures, and we hope that native species of climbing plants could be used to climb up these structures and provide additional shading and also greenery at both ground and a higher level. The bottom here, we've shown a timber lamella screen that we also hope would allow plants to kind of grow up and provide this this space with some kind of privacy and protection. Now we move to the beach club and kiosks. Small timber kiosks sit in the locality of the pavilion and provide refreshments to the beach and event goers. Whilst we understand the importance of keeping the retail areas on the high street, we imagine that select establishments could hire these outposts and to boost their trade, and then the rent could be used towards the maintenance budget of Boardwalk. Then a small axo of where these are located, and we imagine that these would be kind of painted timber structures, very kind of lightweight and simple in their design, but just something that provides a covered area that can be closed off, and with a kind of bar table area around the outside for visitors to both look out onto the pavilion area and also look out onto the beach and ocean as well. Also included a skate park. This is kind of perhaps up for debate, but additional activity space located along the boardwalk could include a skate park. This element is optional, but there's nothing like skating with a view. Being from London and also walking down the South Bank, I know that the skate park down there is a source of entertainment for both people who are interested in it, also people who are walking past, and I think it could be something that's really really interesting and different to have on the beachfront. The picnic area features as a shaded space for rest during normal hours, but might be expanded during large events to include food trucks, of which we've hoped to allow provision for within the kind of existing parking area. In-situ electric points are provided for their benefit, and during these times they make use of the car parking spaces as normal. The diagrams on the right hand kind of show what I'm trying to get across. So the picnic tables, picnic spaces will be there kind of all year round for use by the public informally. During larger events, then food trucks can be brought in, some spaces taken from the parking, but largely these are then beach facing with small electrical points and a space for a serving area in front there. I know that you're very keen on the subject of art, and this is definitely something we would want to encourage and bring forward into the scheme. We know they want to showcase both local and artists from further afield, and of course elements of transitional public artwork adds an extra dynamic to any public space, particularly if they're interactive. So shown here are 5 public spaces that we've designed around the possibility of public work. From the smaller, if you look at the top left, there's a kind of smaller spaces located near the bathhouse. The boardwalk, shown as number 2 here, is quite a prominent public space in which we've shown a climbing wall, but this could also be, any kind of public artwork or activity space. The picnic area to allow visitors to sit and look at the artwork or even interact with it if their kind of kids want to play around. The entrance space, which is probably the most prominent, we've shown a kind of light tunnel here, something that's quite popular and Instagrammable, but again, this could also be a space for a very interactive public artwork that kind of welcomes and invites visitors to the beachfront. Lastly, there's another area on the boardwalk to the east side. So in total, we should see kind of five spaces in which we could introduce public art, and we see these as probably being very interactive, vibrant sculptures or spatial pieces that public can interact with. Based on your feedback, we've looked at a phasing approach. So to begin with, we'd like to introduce the boardwalk as its own entity. Within this, we would include the planting areas, the shading spaces. So on it by itself, this would work perfectly well as a new introduction to the boardwalk and the beachfront, and it would be a really pleasant space for visitors to congregate.
And phase one would also include all the services and infrastructures, so that everything is in place for the later phases.
Second phase would see the construction of the pavilion and arrival plaza, transforming the location from a beachfront walk into a destination for music events and community activities. We feel that the introduction of the pavilion would provide a kind of landmark structure for the beachfront and be something that then people would reference and become slightly another iconic building within the vicinity. And lastly, we see the replacement of the old bathhouse facilities. Previous to this, we may leave them in place, restore them, renovate them, make them more appropriate. But this last phase would see the kind of replacement of this with new, and the splash pool would become integrated into the previous kind of sandy phase design of the boardwalk. The materials that we hope to use, we'd like to look at natural timber, pattern tiles, small areas of terrazzo-esque concrete and powder coated steel would form the aesthetic. Careful consideration has been made to make appropriate choices, yet retain the vibrant colour scheme that we feel suits the location. For ease of maintenance, the option of allowing all timber to naturally weather could also be suitable. In terms of lighting, neon or soft glow lighting would suit our aesthetic if that's required. Planting can include kind of these small palmetto palms for the kind of open planting areas where we've got kind of where we've shown small scale trees. Low-lying ferns for some of the planter areas, specifically the boundary condition, this might be suitable. And then native climbers for the pergolas to provide greenery at all levels in place of the taller, more unsuitable trees we previously showed. And a little bit about us, Jack.
Very briefly, a little bit about Hudson Architects. I mean, this scheme's really Lewis's vision, but there is a practice backing him up. So Hudson Architects was founded by Anthony Hudson almost 20 years ago exactly. We're a medium-sized practice of 20 people. We're based in Norfolk on the east coast of England, which means we know all about coastal projects. We've done loads of projects in Norfolk, and we've also worked on a lot of seaside kind of revival projects. We have a lot of towns in the UK that kind of had glorious years that maybe need updating, and we've worked on several projects like that. We work across the UK and have completed international projects from as far afield as India, so we're no stranger to working across continents. We're a design-led practice. We're known for high quality design and playing a leading role in sustainable practices. At the core of the business is private homes, but we have extensive experience in community, leisure and education projects, as well as experience with old buildings and heritage assets. So this kind of project is no stranger to us, and there's a few examples of some relevant projects on screen now, some realised, and actually the two sketches there are actually award competition entries that we won, both of which are sort of seaside locations for regeneration projects. So yeah, that's a little bit about us.
And yeah, just to finish on a view of the whole scheme, showing its relationship between some of the local buildings, the local context, beach, and of course the sea. So I think we've kind of explained most of this, but this just gives you an overall view of our vision, really. Yeah, thank you very much for listening to our ideas. We've really enjoyed dissecting the brief and thinking creatively about what we feel Atlantic Beach would like. Yeah, as Jack said, being in a coastal location ourselves, we understand and value the aspirations of the brief, and know firsthand how an effective beachfront master plan can hugely impact the communities that reside there. And we now invite any questions.
Well, thanks, guys. That was, super exciting. It's been, from phase 1 to 2, I think we've all been eager to see your first submission, Lewis, really caught a lot of people's eye just in sort of the form of it. So it's great to see that fleshed out, and I think it's still super exciting. Let's just kind of go, starting with the members of the jury who are not here. Let's just kind of go through the jury and see if folks have questions or comments. Patrick, if you want to lead us off.
No, well, I really appreciate the presentation and the incredible work from Lewis and Jack. I think you guys presented a beautiful scheme. I mean, it's as Trey said, it caught a lot of people's attention. It's super clever. The graphics are quite beautiful. The logic is very sound. I mean, I think there's lots of things I can say very positive about this project. I think the challenge is, is the feasibility. I think you guys have always nailed the vision. I think you've also kind of nailed the fact that it's not a traditional boardwalk that's connecting a larger kind of linear infrastructure, right? It's so that by introducing all those nodes, you're kind of making the boardwalk a boardwalk unto itself with its own destinations, which I think are all super clever and very playful. I think the challenge here, you guys are super talented designers. The challenge is, how to achieve this vision that everyone has kind of fell in love with a limited budget, and I don't know if that's a phasing thing that goes beyond that, or the actual kind of materiality. We can talk about, I'd like to hear a little bit more about the detail of the bathhouse and the event pavilion, structurally, what's that cladding? I know that there's a lot of wood lattice kind of shade elements, but how do you see that construction? Because for me, it seems like the 3 most important pieces, like this vision aside, this is wonderful total vision, but the first phase has to have the boardwalk, the bathhouse, I would think, to service, or like you said, Lewis, you could refurbish what's there until you could afford a bigger bathhouse, and the event pavilion. Those are the 3 key pieces. You guys have kind of gone well beyond in a wonderful way, but kind of just curious to hear your thoughts on the feasibility, that a little bit more maybe about how you would propose phasing this to achieve this kind of design.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously being realistic, we agree. We've shown you a lot of kind of stuff there. I agree. I think some elements we'd have to kind of refine, look at in terms of the detail, the materiality. Maybe it's an exercise in cost, and maybe kind of refining things down slightly. In terms of the construction of the pavilions, we'd look to do that with a timber construction. We'd like to try and keep it fairly simple and have it very kind of pavilion-esque. So not too many kind of thermal envelopes, but really just a kind of like timber structure, clad in timber. Maybe that's painted, maybe it's not. We would try for sure and try and keep those kind of structures as simple and as affordable as possible. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I mean, I think there's always an temptation with competitions to kind of go wild with ideas, and I think that, truth be told, we're, you know, being based in the UK, we're not too familiar with you know, how much building projects cost over in North Carolina, and that's where, you know, if we won the competition, it would start getting into, you know, reality would start coming in, and one of the first things we do is would engage a cost consultant to do a cost check, which, because we really need that sort of local advice. And I think what we've got here is a concept that can size up or down, it can adapt, it can be phased into multiple different phases. It's a very adaptable concept that can come in. So I think, you know, what we've put forward is a kind of big vision and an idea of how it could be phased.
Yeah.
But I think there would be we'd need to do a lot more work to kind of to make that a reality. But I feel confident that, you know, well, we're very used to, you know, we're not one of these kind of practices who do competitions all day long. Like, we're very used to real projects, working with real budgets.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I have every confidence that we can adapt a project to a budget. I mean, in terms of how it's funding, I think just picking up on a couple of things. One thing that Lewis mentioned earlier, which is the retail element, which, you know, it might be that it's not necessarily an upfront cost, but that if they can be into future funding, that you've got lettable space there, commercial space that can bring money in, and also maybe there's opportunity for sponsorship, be that certain you know, art spaces or the activity, you know, there might be ways of funding that are less direct, but that's just an idea.
And Jack, you made an important point. I just want to reiterate for everybody on the jury as we go along, as well as those who are watching, is that, you know, we're still at a really conceptual phase of the design. This is obviously a little more refined from the first round, but, you know, what we're seeing from these guys and the other firms today are conceptual designs, and it's I don't think we're at the stage yet where we need to dig into every detail and figure out how we're going to keep sand out of a pump on a splash pad. We're still thinking big picture here, so let's not let our discussion today get too sidetracked by the details that would naturally get worked out in the full-blown design process in the coming months.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. You know, and also just the fact that they are conceiving all these as open air structures saves so much money as well. Even the bathhouse, you know, could be totally naturally ventilated. So, I mean, I just compliment the work. I think it's super high level. I think, you know, it's really beautiful. I think even to the, you know, in the first round, you guys had a carousel, which we quite like. There's a big amusement history in this part of the beach. And even the carousel I thought was really beautiful, with just those kind of round bumpers to sit on, and the lighting design. I mean, you guys are super talented. We really appreciate you pursuing this competition. And I mean, I personally couldn't be more happy with the scheme. I think it's quite beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, Marjorie, we'll move on to you. Any questions or comments you have?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you so much. The design is very pleasing. There are several things that I really feel strongly about, that I applaud, and that is the continuous bench. You know, that idea, you know, I've worked a lot in public projects, and, you know, there's a bench here and a bench there, but it just seems that you could truly, a lot of people could find, you know, seating and enjoy. I, of course, love the designated and potential public art areas. I think that those were well defined and, you know, really identify a lot of opportunities. I like the idea of some kind of a grand entrance. So that was appealing, just that there was something iconic, that Instagrammable, as you mentioned. I know that the kiosks are kind of down the road, but just a question I thought about was, what do those areas look like when they're not activated? Just, I guess what I'm saying is, you know, we have seasons, very distinct seasons, and there's probably many times of the year that those would not be activated. I mean, I could be wrong, but I was just thinking, how many of those were you thinking, and what would those do when they were not activated?
We were thinking of having, so you've got the main kind of beach club, which I imagine would be slightly larger, and then you've got another kiosk maybe that sold ice cream, you know, kind of like small things in season. Obviously out of season, they would be closed off or shut up, but the shading kind of devices around, we hope that you'd still be able to possibly sit outside and it still becomes a kind of a public seating space, whether there's a vendor there located selling you things or not during the closed seasons.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I obviously don't know the area that well and how your sort of visitor numbers flux throughout the year, but I mean, knowing similar locations here in the UK, it's these kind of projects are about trying to lengthen a season or trying to, you know, give an attraction that's potentially an all year round thing, rather than just pop up things in the summer. That actually this can become somewhere that, yeah, there's appeals throughout all the seasons.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Thanks, Marjorie. And moving into the room now, Danny, you got any, want to start with any questions or comments?
Well, one of them is a comment. I love the round circles. I love the way that pavilion is. It gives 360 degrees. You got people all over the place. And being an engineer myself, if I drew it, it would be all lines and rectangles and the circles and the way you designed it. I could see us building that boardwalk to start with, and then adding the other items as it goes. And I see phasing in this design as an easy process.
Yeah,
I really do. I see it as an easy process, and the key would be getting in the right, because if we don't have bands and stuff, we'll have to have electronics. And so cabling, wiring, detail on that would be great as we do it. And the circle pavilion, is that a flat roof? Have you thought about flat roof?
We proposed it would be, well, not obviously completely flat, but yeah, flat, more or less a flat structure, yeah.
Okay, then, you know, drainage would be the consideration there, because it's not unusual during the rainy season to get 2 or 3 inches in an hour, have to deal with that. So the flat roof, plenty of flat roofs around. I mean, it can work. It's just something to consider. But I really like that layout and that design. I see it being very flexible for any type of activity we'd have down there.
yeah, I appreciate the different views of using the pavilion needs to be the multi-use structure, and to see it presented in kind of a classroom format as well as the movie night or the band, it's useful to see that flexibility. All right, and then
Yeah, thank you, yeah.
Yes, well, I'll just kind of echo what everyone here has said and just thank you for participating, and just so impressed by the design, the materials. It's beautiful, it's flexible. I have young children, so I really look at a lot of these projects and submissions and think about, well, would we be doing that? Would we use that? Would my kids like that? Does this work? And this works 100%. I think you've really just expanded, you know, compared to like the West Coast in the US and these long boardwalks that go from one city to the next, which are amazing and fun, and my children love those. And you're kind of still giving us the opportunity to have that within a much smaller space. The repetition of circular forms, I love, that caught my eye, you know, right off the bat initially. I love kind of the juxtaposition of the wood slats and the boardwalk next to the concrete. I think it's just a really lovely combination of materials, and something that will last for a long time. It doesn't feel overly trendy or too modern. So I just think you all have hit the nail on the head. And as far as questions, I don't think I have too many that haven't already been addressed, so.
Okay, well, chip in if something comes to
Okay.
mind. Fred,
Thank you
your
very much.
thoughts?
I thought it was extremely well done. I pretty much ditto my previous speakers. I like the curvilinear part. You know, there's some things that in the details can get worked out, but it's, I think it will be costly. Maybe there's a way to overcome that with, you know, there's some way, if it's good enough and the group thinks it's good enough, then I think there's some way maybe to overcome it, maybe some kind of public-private thing, or I don't have the answer, but it is extremely well done, well thought out, I think. And there maybe would be some concerns about visibility from the neighbors, you know, blocking visibility, but congratulations, this nicely done.
Thank you.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Just to touch on funding for a bit, our town staff is looking at several grant funding options for this. There's a town, I'd say about an hour, 2 hours south of us, Curie Beach. Those of us from North Carolina will be familiar with it. Recently did a similar project where they raised, they had over $2 million, I think, in funding from various grant sources. From, you know, there are, you know, public beach access grants, there are park grants in our state. You know, there's a federal fund for that encompasses amphitheaters, another that is for walking trails, including Boardwalk. So our staff has the roadmap that this other beach town in North Carolina used for their project, and is already working on. I think we've actually submitting for a grant next week. So you know, for those watching, you know, this, where our intention is for this to be funded in large part by grants, along with some donations, and then obviously some town funds as well. I just, you know, I want to follow up on something that Fred mentioned. I know that a lot of the folks that are watching online are from are property owners in the immediate vicinity of the boardwalk. And some of the concerns we've heard for them are about how we continue to provide some privacy for their homes when our intention is to raise the boardwalk up a couple feet to get it sort of out of the sand. Louis, you showed a couple slides early on. Can you just go back to those?
Sure.
And kind of talk through the landscaping, this louver plan that you talked about? I think it's a good solution that, as you said, you know, let air and view out, but give some privacy in. But I just want to make sure that the neighbors that are watching can get a chance to see this close up.
Yeah, so what we've kind of suggest, we've got this, as you can see, this kind of wave lamella form that's raised up to, you know, kind of eye level, using this kind of not perforated, but, you know, lamella format. What you get is views. You can get views directly out, which is kind of shown in this small diagram to the right hand side in this circle. So residents or property owners, they will still be able to see straight through this, whereas your kind of viewing angle when you're on the boardwalk is more of an either 45 or 90 degree angle. So that offers some kind of privacy. The waveform itself is hoped that you'd be able to get intermittent views out, and also largely kind of prevent too many views in the opposite direction. Again, planting in this location, maybe we could make these planters slightly wider in the kind of bottom of the curve there, but that planting would also over time help to shield some of those views at kind of eye level. And again, these would be used as you know, hopefully the kind of plants as they mature kind of grow up. And there's potential for views, you know, views out as well from those residences. We didn't want to block those, but also we're obviously very concerned about bringing more people and the kind of maintaining privacy to those property owners as well.
I think it's about finding a balance, isn't it, between, you know, the homeowners have got lot to lose by putting a kind of solid screen up. So it's about trying to maintain that while giving them privacy at the same time. I think we're on the right lines, but I think there's refinement that could be made to improve that as we understand more about kind of where rooms and houses are positioned behind, which obviously we have plans, but we can sort of delve into that a little further.
Yeah, again, we're at a real conceptual level here. We'll need to have access out of these homes as well. I think, what we've seen here are the building blocks that you would use for, to address this situation.
Mhm.
So am I looking at this right? Is this what he was just presenting?
Hang on, when Fred's asking a question, looking at your,
What he was just presenting, is that right here?
yeah, that would be along in front of the oceanfront homes.
There's a plan there if that helps.
Yeah, so here's the, kind of the buffer that would go around all of that.
But you could also easily increase the width of that buffer if you wanted to get a little more. I mean, those are minute details, but it's easily adaptable to create even more space there.
For sure, yeah. There's plenty. I can't remember the exact distance between. There's plenty of room though to increase that for sure.
Yeah. And again, for those that are watching, these guys are in the UK. They haven't been on site yet. We're doing a conceptual plan here, so it's unreasonable to expect them to have construction drawings of every detail of a site that they've never seen in person.
I got one more question.
Yeah, Dan?
Lewis, you said natural timber boarding for the decking on that, and I know that's in detail, but I was curious, do you have some special boarding in mind other than just treated wood?
There's definitely something. I don't know if we've used anything previously, but we know that there are products out there that offer a kind of, it's a natural timber that's been treated in such a way, or heat treated in such a way that minimizes the maintenance and makes it more hardy. I can't remember the name of these off the top of my head, but
there are products like Ebony, but there's a whole range out there that are basically softwoods that are impregnated to and take on the properties of hardwoods, but with a fraction of the cost. And that was the kind of thing that we were thinking of using.
Yeah, there are a lot of things you can use, and these will be getting 365 days a year by 24 hours a day exposure to salt air and wind, and just regular salt timber. That's what's there now, and it's an issue. So I know there are other products, and that's why I thought maybe you had one in mind. That was why I was asking. I thought maybe you had a specific one in mind that to take that kind of abuse from the weather.
Yeah, most of what we see down here is this sort of what we call pressure treated lumber, and most often here it's pine.
Yeah.
But there are some composite materials out there now that are, so there's different options.
There's a type of wood that they're using on some decks now that is real expensive, but it takes that abuse real well.
Yeah. As you say, it's really important that it's robust, because it's gonna take a beating over the years from the wind and the sand and the hopefully thousands of people that walk down it every year.
Yeah, it'll get a lot of walking on. That'll actually help it. But it'll pour down rain, get wet, and come out and be 95 degrees right on top of it. The heat hitting it. That's what gets the wood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate you showing that little bit of the construction detail of how the boardwalk would be elevated slightly. That's something that we're considering, so
and
that
I like that idea.
So that basically you can get some air under this wood that'll preserve it more so than what we currently have, which is just boards on a sort of stringer sitting on the concrete. So this will help, I think, preserve the decking there.
definitely, and help with drainage as well.
Right.
All right, well, guys, this was wonderful. Anything else from the jury?
No, just a
Thank you.
fabulous
And
job.
I loved your term seaside revival that you've worked in those projects. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
I think it's a really exciting opportunity, and yeah, we'd love to be involved with it further. So thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Again, nice
Been
work,
really great.
guys.
Great, sounds great. Thank you so much for the introduction and nice e-meeting you all. So yeah, let's just get to it.
Yeah, we're FORMA. I'm Daniel.
I'm Miroslava.
I'll give a kind of very quick introduction to our firm, and then I'm sure we can talk through more about that in the Q&A if you like. Miroslav and I started FORMA 2018, based in New York City, although we know and have worked with each other for many more years prior to that. The firm, we work on projects of many different types and many different scales, from residential to civic buildings as well. We're particularly excited about this opportunity, especially. I think just to give a few words to kind of how we work as well. Certainly, as many architects, we love working through images, drawings, models, animations. We have a few we want to show today even. But I think that the bigger component about the way we work is the discussion portion, is the feedback. Starting a project and really understanding what the issues are, and being able to develop a dialogue and a communication with the client, and in this case, the town, the community leaders. So I'm going to start pulling up the presentation. We'll sort of transition into that, but we're especially excited about working with the community on this project. Just let's see. Oops.
A little preview again, you know.
But we like to start projects right in the middle of the presentation. No, we like to start projects with a little bit of a broad overview. I had the chance to visit Atlantic Beach in December, right before the competition. It actually worked out very well. I'm actually there every Christmas visiting family. So it was an easy trip for me to make over to Atlantic Beach, talk with a few of the residents there at the Tackle Box Tavern, I think it is. But we like to try and understand the context that we're working within and build on that in many ways. And I think that, as I mentioned, we like communication is important. So I think that everything you'll see today is really just the start, hopefully, of that discussion. And especially for the public, these ideas, even though they might seem polished and they might seem refined, are really just a way into almost brainstorming and thinking about what are the potentials for this project. So I just want to kind of preface that, but Miroslava will kick us off, I think, with the presentation.
Yeah. So just kind of briefly give you an overview of what we will cover, a little contents page, but we'll introduce the kind of three main project goals as we saw it very briefly at the beginning. Then we'll go through design components, so really the kind of kit of parts that really creates the whole. Then we'll dive a little bit more specifically into the programming of the various components. We'll talk again about the green buffer that was also mentioned in the feedback from you. Materiality, so materials, a little bit of the phasing, and then we'll end on revised pavilion design. So that's basically what we'll kind of go over. But just to kind of jump into the first portion of it, there were really three aspects, as we saw, were really important to kind of keep in mind. One was the kind of community. Second was ecology, or the environment. And the third was art. And I'll briefly talk about it at the beginning, but we'll return to all three of these throughout the presentation. But the first one, the community aspect, as Daniel mentioned, is really important for us because understanding who we are designing for is really critical. And so understanding that this place needs to really function on a kind of 24-hour, 7 days a week basis for the local residents is really important. But likewise, you do have these larger events that are kind of happening throughout the year. And so like larger groups of people actually need to be also accommodated. So creating this kind of perfect balance between the local and the global is something that we're really interested in, and also creating a kind of destination for all. So that was one major aspect of our kind of thinking on it. The second one was ecology, and more specifically, the kind of cohabitation with the sea. This is a kind of very rough changing environment. So really understanding that this is not in the middle of even Manhattan or Ohio, but it is actually a kind of environment that is constantly in flux was really important to us. And so we were really thinking about how can we protect the Atlantic beach without creating a kind of hard barrier. Currently, you do have the seawall that really kind of separates the boardwalk from the beach. But we were thinking, how can we do it in a way that is not only functional, but also beautiful? And what if we were to create a kind of piece of infrastructure that has both a kind of positive impact socially, culturally, and environmentally, and creates really kind of focal point for the community. So that was really important to us as well. And then last but not least, is the component of art, maybe more specifically the kind of iconic street art. And there have been a lot of examples, especially in the past several years in the US and Europe too, really thinking about how to give the whole area a unique visual identity. And we were particularly interested in this kind of street ground art as a kind of transformative, potentially, and we know low cost, but highly impactful visual strategy. And so that was really important to us to kind of bring to as a kind of new piece into the project. Also important, and this image maybe a little bit illustrates it, is the kind of communal component of many of these projects. And Daniel will talk a little bit more specifically about it when we talk about the specifics for the project here, but a lot of these iconic street art pieces are actually done with big community involvement. So that was something that we were really interested in as well. So we'll just kind of jump straight into the design components now.
So I'll go through what the kind of bones of the design are, but also really how we started a little bit. This is a little bit tongue in cheek, but Miroslav and I were talking about, what it really means to have fun at the beach, a day at the beach. And there's an attitude of playfulness, we feel, silliness, almost looseness, that we were wondering if we could somehow channel that even into the plan, even into the architecture itself of the boardwalk. And so sort of as an example of inspiration for that, the Matisse collage on the left that uses simple cutouts, bold colors, and a sort of arrangement and composition of that to generate a sort of looseness, a sort of playfulness. So that's the sort of primer, but I'll kind of quickly run through the components just to sort of situate everybody, beginning with an aerial of the beach, obviously the water at the bottom of the screen, starting immediately with the boardwalk. The first move that we wanted to do, certainly, and we'll go into detail about this, was to create a separation between the private residential buildings to the north, and then that very public space of the boardwalk. Secondly, certainly we wanted to reach out with a series of decks that would be very active spaces. And I want to mention just a couple things about this. You'll see, obviously, we use simple geometry. We think both for sort of cost-effective reasons, but also geometry that is not taking over the whole of the beach. I think that we can just sort of discreetly and almost strategically push out with that activity from the boardwalk in a way that could be highly effective. And then the sort of looseness of it, allowing those decks to be shaken up to a certain degree, which offers the ability for programs to be overlapped. It also offers for kind of interesting moments between the decks and between the spaces and the adjacencies with the boardwalk. which we'll get into. We know, of course, there's a need for shade and for kind of centralizing events. So scattering an additional series of shading structures and ultimately the pavilion, which we'll get into. And then the last kind of component of the design is the artwork that Miroslava was mentioning. And we think that there's an opportunity here to highlight sort of particularly those zones of activity, but also to stitch together some of the decks that have different programs and some of the spaces that have different functions attributed to them. And that is sort of the buildup, quite simply, of the plan, sort of from the beginning. I won't go into this drawing in particular, although we'll come back to it many times, and we'll go, I think, next into really what each of those program spaces are and what they could look like.
So just jumping, excuse me, a little bit, well, out of the project to go back into the project, but really we understand that there is a kind of rich history of fun and play in the area, and kind of amusement, park rides, the music festivals, the dancing venues were very much part of the DNA of the area. So we're really thinking about how can we bring back that energy and really generate a kind of active seafront environment that really not only celebrates the past, and we very much think that that's very important, but also starts to kind of look forward towards the future. And then secondly, it was the kind of beach and fun activities. So understanding a little bit more specifically, what do actually people like to do at the beach? We also understood from the public comments that there is a desire for more places for children to play and kind of family areas. So understanding the kind of different groups of individuals that would be coming here, also for somebody to really just have a little bit more of a kind of relaxing or calmer environment was important for us. So again, it's something that, like, as a programmatic approach, we thought that we needed to encompass actually quite a bit of a breadth of activity. Just very briefly, and hopefully, I'm not sure if you can see the whole plan or if you can see this window here, maybe I should move it a little bit, but
Yeah, we can see the whole plan.
the whole plan? Okay, great, fantastic, thank you. So just to kind of orient you, and this is very similar how we had it in the first phase, but kind of thinking about this 800 feet of length, subdivided more or less into three parts. One, which is on your left, would be a little bit more focused on games and play. The center one, which is centered around the pavilion, would be about gathering and events. And then the one on your right, which would be towards the east, is really a little bit calmer, focusing more on rest, relaxation, and lounging. So just a kind of broader kind of scope, programmatic, that's how we envisioned the entire length of the boardwalk. But I'm going to start to jump into the games and play, which is on your left here. So thinking a little bit more about the kind of activities that might be happening that typically or maybe not always happen at the beach, but could certainly be brought to the beach, was something we were interested in. So wouldn't it be fun to have a yoga class overlooking the ocean, or actually a workout, a kind of exterior gym, or shuffleboard, or giant kind of game of chess. So that's what we're kind of thinking about, like how can we activate that area? So looking at the kind of close-up of the site plan a little bit more specifically, and this big box here is the Crab Crawl restaurant. So we were also thinking like, okay, what is it? Crab Crawl, yeah. Crab Crawl, sorry. But thinking about like how can actually we even build up on that activation of that area. So number 8 on the top left would be actually the access point from the existing parking lot. And you would have immediately the bathhouse structure, which is number 7. And then number 1, as you can see, the longer piece, the longer deck would be what we call a game deck, which would also have an ADA access to the beach. Right adjacent to it would be what we call an activity deck, a little bit more kind of flexible zone, which would both be tied by a shading structure. And then as you start moving towards the center, you would also encounter the next deck, which is the gym deck. So this is the first visualization. But again, thinking about what would be fun to actually do at the beach, a giant chess game or checkers. We know also that cornhole is kind of popular. So they're like really thinking about like, what are some of these activities? You can see a lady on the left, like doing a little bit of yoga overlooking the ocean. But this is a view of also that shading structure that starts to basically tie those two decks together. Similarly, and this would be the actually first structure that one might encounter when entering the boardwalk area from the public parking at the west, but this is the bathhouse. Again, we wanted something that is not different from the rest of the boardwalk, that actually looks like something that belongs. It's not a separate structure, but it really is part of the boardwalk of the DNA. We will go a little bit more specifically into the graphics and how it works, but this would also be applied to the vertical surfaces here. And then the shading structure again, or the roof of the bathhouse is exactly the same as all the other shading structures. So you kind of understand that it's part of a larger whole. This would be a little bit different, and here I may be a little bit close up kind of sections and a simple plan. Simple, functional. You would have the exterior showers facing a little bit more of a greenery. So it's almost like you're showering in the garden. And then the only difference between this shading structure and the rest of them would be that there would be actually also a clear corrugated PVC plastic on top, and we'll go a little bit more into the structures themselves too. But that would obviously prevent the rain from getting in, but we were also interested in having that kind of a little bit more environmental atmospheric effect within the bathroom itself. So the light could kind of go through the slots. This is a view of the gym deck. So again, thinking about how some of these more kind of calisthenics and body weight equipment could exist, again, part of the deck rather than something that is, you know, like a different or machines that are brought, you know, from the gym. And here's a little bit of an animation as I continue to talk, but you're basically zooming in onto the area that I just spoke of on the rest. But with this, especially the gym, we were really thinking about how can you, I mean, it's almost like a playground for adults, right? We will have, and we'll talk about the playground for children. We have also playground for adults, which might be the gym. It might be something such as this deck here, which actually would be very much for families and so forth. We just passed an ADA ramp on your left. So that would be the kind of accessible point to the beach. And then you can see the shading structure, and we were really interested in creating something that has a light touch, that is not too heavy. The light could actually a little bit filter through. And then again, here, this is the gym. Obviously, we would work with the community and with you all to really think about like what would be needed for the gym, but that was basically the kind of preliminary idea.
I'll jump quickly into another portion at the other end of the boardwalk that has a different feel, a kind of sort of slower pace to it. The simple inspirations for these would be a simple garden space, a Zen garden, if you will, on the left, but also simple lounge spaces. We like the idea of furniture, large scale furniture that could even be somewhat interactive, somewhat movable. This is an example on the High Line of in New York. I actually worked at Gillespie Video Renfro, so I'm familiar with this kind of work, but they proposed sort of aggregation, or the ability to aggregate some of these seats together for larger groups. And so we took some inspiration for that in the lounge deck. But again, just to orient you quickly, we're at the east end. You can see in the key plan here, looking at that, the number one, the longer deck, which is the lounge deck. It also has the grove of palms that we'll get into the species on that as well. And then the farthest deck to the east the sort of more eco garden deck. But we were thinking it would be nice, fun to have fixed but somewhat adjustable seating, even embedded in the boardwalk. Something that you could rotate both for different views of the water or different sun orientations. If you're like me, yeah, well, perfect. I need to usually avoid the sun. I burn pretty easily, but or rotate them close together so they face one another, and you can gather with a slightly larger group. So something simple like this, where your ability to sit alone or with others in the grove, the palm grove that we mentioned, we think would be just quite nice at the boardwalk. Ooh, went the wrong way. But then the other image for the deck, and this is, you know, something that would be very calming, hopefully serene, and this could take many shapes and many forms. We like the idea of the simple cutout that people can gather around. Obviously, we would work through the plantings and what would happen here. But just to offer a sort of different look, a different feel at this east end of the boardwalk, and distinguish it a little bit from that sort of more active left side, and you'll see in a minute, center side. And again, just taking a look at what that begins to look like in 3 dimensions, seeing the potential rotation of some of the lounge chairs there down below. I did also mention that there's another ramp here, and this brings ADA access close to 125 feet out closer to the hard packed surface, and then moving out over the sort of calm, tranquil deck space. Where no working, the lady in pink might be on a laptop, but no working would be allowed, only relaxation in that area.
And then the third kind of central component is really about gathering and events. And again, we were thinking about the kind of activities, especially collective activities, that would be great to have, especially around the pavilion. As I mentioned earlier, we understand that the desire for a children's playground or splash pad was something that was desired by the community, but also just like picnic areas where you can just come and have lunch or a sandwich. And so we basically organized it in quite simple way again. So on this plan, you can see number 1 is the pavilion, kind of centered. Number 2, which would be obviously the continuation of the boardwalk, but that could actually also then double, and we'll go through it a little bit more specifically, as a dance floor, with number 3 being this kind of longer, what we call grand stair. So really kind of gradual connection to the beach, which we thought was important. We really wanted to kind of eliminate that barrier between the beach and the boardwalk. And then on the left, number 4 is the kind of larger playground area with a splash pad. Number 5, right adjacent to it, is the picnic area. And then again, both of them are kind of tied together by the shading structure. On your right side here, number 7, we call it a mist deck, but this is something that we would also love to work with the community to see if they would want to, and if you want to bring potentially a beach bar or kind of some kind of flexible area. So that is definitely a zone that we would love to kind of work with everybody to develop further. And then just not the least, but number 9 would actually be an area we're thinking for food trucks, rotating food trucks, which would be located right next to the access point. So number 8 are the kind of shallow ramps that get you from Atlantic Boulevard to the beach. But basically, as you're entering from Atlantic Boulevard onto the kind of central zone, you would have the ability to pick up a sandwich or a popsicle and then go ahead to the picnic area, which would be right adjacent to it. You see a little bit of the pavilion on your left, we'll go into it, but then also the shading structure that ties together the picnic area with the playground on your right. And this is another view of it, basically just zooming in. So we can see some of the picnic tables would be in the sun, closer to the water, but some would be shaded by the shading structure that, concerned parents could be sitting there by keeping an eye on children right next to it at the playground, which is basically looking here from the different view a little bit above. But the idea with the playground was also something interesting to us. We are actually really interested in playgrounds and play, and have done a few projects that kind of really start to think about the play and the playground environment for children, something that hopefully is a little bit more open-ended, that is typical for this kind of today's playgrounds, urban playgrounds, and it's something that maybe belongs a little bit more to the deck again. The kind of so it might be using the same materials, it might work with the graphic a little bit more, but it would provide children with a little bit more kind of open-ended exploration. So it's not necessarily something that they know that they need to do only one thing, like on a swing set, for example, but there are actually elements that they can kind of like really explore and encourages kind of the kind of exploration that might be desired from children. So again, zooming in from above on the area overlooking, the idea was that, again, the pavilion definitely is the centerpiece, but the pavilion, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, also thinking about it as a kind of really multifunctional zone, requires also, or we thought would kind of provide a great opportunity for these auxiliary programs to function around. If we zoom in a little bit right here, also what was really important, and we loved your suggestion, and thank you for the suggestion for removing the guardrails, because this really kind of pushed us to think about it a little bit more differently and really connect and provide, again, like extend the idea of the staircase throughout the entire length. So the entire boardwalk is actually oriented towards the ocean, towards the beach. So that was basically the kind of primary goal of this move here. And then, yep, materials.
So we'll pivot slightly and go through a few more of the details of the project quickly before ending on the pavilion. I just want to talk a little bit about the materials for the project. We certainly wanted to use materials that were resilient. One change that we made from the first phase was to translate all of the components into wood components. And to avoid having to deal with metal on the ocean front, and use materials that are familiar to Atlantic Beach, even the pressure treated pine decking. We did look and could consider other materials for the deck, more resilient woods, ipe and Kimura tropical woods. There's some downsides to this. One is environmental, another kind of more importantly is expense, and I think that we've tried with the forms of the project and with the materials to keep that in mind, to not go kind of way over budget, but then to also, what are the ways that we can treat the woods, specialize certain areas, highlight them with white oils, with essentially a whitewash that maintains their texture and grain, and also is a little bit easier to maintain. It can be aged sort of more naturally. And then the third kind of component, the sort of more colorful aspect to the project, painted wood decking. I'll go into that a little bit in detail. I'm sure there would be questions about that. Obviously deploying a large-scale mural surface on the ground, there's many examples of, particularly in urban areas on asphalt. This is a different example, but I'll go into that. We think that there's potentially opportunities for this to be a community activity of groups of all ages. Not everybody likes to paint though, so that's certainly not the only way to achieve the project. The other aspect of this, which we think could be interesting, knowing that if we were to use painted surfaces, there would be a lifespan of that, and it could be a rotating event essentially that happens periodically, where the deck is repainted, perhaps even with a different design. Could be another event that's sort of added to the schedule, the town schedule. So and we think that there's really opportunities. The challenges of the mural painting, I think, also offers certainly opportunities. As I mentioned, a lot of the examples are with asphalt. There's certainly examples with wood decking. We have looked into preliminary research on the ways to maintain it or to keep the lifespan of it. There's certain sealants that can be used that can certainly prolong the lifespan, even under the harsh environment of the salt water, which we can get into, I think, even in the Q&A if you're interested. In terms of the graphic that we showed in the visuals, just a quick note. Well, first shout out Kyle Troyer in our office. Was really spearheading this and got into the graphic of it. But we loved his development and what he and this image as a starting point, as it represents a sort of splash, not only a splash of color, but almost splashing in the water in a certain way. And to splash and deploy that in the various aspects on the deck is essentially what we did. And we felt like it did a little bit two things for us. One, again, tying together some of the decks that have different functions. And then the other being simply to highlight the zones of kind of more activity. Color can certainly be used for wayfinding. People are drawn to that. So thinking about how to deploy it to that end. But we liked, this is actually an image from the first phase, but we liked the aspect of the color just being a part of the environment, something that you walk on, something that's sort of always there, something that you might not always be focused on, but certainly is really just a landscape, of the boardwalk itself. This was another image actually from the first phase that we haven't developed this design further because we wanted to focus on the beach, but we think there's an opportunity not only with the ground art, that we might be proposing, but also to carve out space for rotating three-dimensional sculpture, three-dimensional art exhibitions that could be put on. And we think that the top of the circle is a perfect place for that, so that they would be not only places for that art, but also places to sit and enjoy that as a sort of announcement to the beach as you arrive.
And then before going into the kind of last section of it, which is a little bit of phasing and pavilion, just going back to the green buffer and also thinking about some of the comments that you had for us. Obviously, this is the existing condition as it is today, or if it was in December as Daniel took this image. But one of the challenges, or the very kind of initial challenge was, thinking about it, okay, we know we need to actually elevate the boardwalk up, which obviously presents a sectional problem because we have the existing properties that currently actually seamlessly connect to that boardwalk zone. And this is kind of looking at it from above. Secondly, and this image was also kind of a little bit of an inspiration for us, thinking about the greenery that already somewhat exists in that really minimal zone, and kind of using it and expanding it. So creating this kind of green, what we call a green buffer between the new boardwalk and the existing properties. So looking at a very simple section, just to orient you on the left, that would be the kind of gate to the existing oceanfront properties. You have the boardwalk in the middle, then there is a kind of jut out, which is the existing concrete wall, and then the beach is on your right. And so the proposed new section obviously elevates the boardwalk. We have it roughly around 30 inches, but obviously give or take, this could work. And then and we decrease the width of the green buffer as per your suggestions to roughly 7.5 feet. But that would provide a nice area for some of those kind of more resilient plantings, which I'll show just in the next slide, to inhabit that zone. And you can see it in the section, and I'll explain it also in the next image. There is a little bit of a seating, so really rethinking what would otherwise be a guardrail be between the green buffer and the boardwalk. So we were thinking that how can we actually use that zone, which is basically for seating. We thought, like, wouldn't it be great if you could actually, along the entire 800 feet, have an opportunity to just sit, overlook the ocean, overlook the different decks and programs that are in front of you. That would basically happen along that green buffer edge. We also thought it would be really fun to have a series of plantings and planters, which could be more seasonal, So that would actually add, again, a little bit of a kind of greenery, but also different, potentially not through the coloring, but through the plantings itself. And also, and you can see it a little bit in this image, the kind of white square, that would be also a place for the historical markers. So suddenly the edge between the green buffer and the boardwalk is not just a simple wall or a simple guardrail, but it has this kind of multifunctional, thickened edge. And again, a series of plantings. Again, the PDF that you forwarded to us was very useful, and we kind of took a dive into the various plantings that were provided there. Again, we would love to work, and we've done it with a few projects, that we would love to work with local nurseries. We found that they're actually really knowledgeable about the kind of, especially the local flora that would thrive. But thinking about the scale, almost like from small, medium, and large, we were kind of choosing some of these more resilient plants that could, as we understand, work quite well for this environment. So just to, again, zoom out and give you an overview. So this is the green buffer that I just talked about. You would have, and it would be separated or interspersed by just simple stairs that would connect to the existing properties exactly where their gates are. Here you would have a little bit this kind of the sliver, which is the seating, which would be between the green buffer and the boardwalk. In between would be the places for the historic markers. So it was almost like a storyline that you could follow from one end to the end. Again, there would be an opportunity to have as many as needed or as few as needed, potentially also with the ability to change it over time. And then just quite simply, thinking about the showers and the rinse zone. So obviously ADA access ramps, but also the kind of staircase points. Those would be the zones where this would be located, with obviously the addition of the bathhouse exterior shower zone that I already showed.
So I'll end with just a quick note on phasing, and then with the pavilion. In terms of phasing, it would be simple approach, seeing the plan in its final phase, but starting quite simply with the boardwalk and some of those deck spaces out towards the water would be the first phase. In the second phase, you could develop the bathhouse and the connection to the boardwalk and the landscape around it. Should mention also that the first phase, the existing facilities could continue to be used, obviously. And then in the third phase, we'd focus on the pavilion and the boardwalk and seating that's sort of immediately surrounding that structure, which I'll just get into in our last section. We did develop the design a little bit more, and we took some cues from the pagoda building. I'm sure you're all familiar with, although it had, I understand, a short lifespan. There's a few things about it that we really appreciated in very simple terms. One, the sort of long, elegant proportion of the building. Two, how it opened up that broad face, and was parallel to the ocean. And then three, the simple roof structure that gave it that presence immediately on the beach. So we tried to channel all three of those elements with a somewhat revised design from the first phase, while keeping some of the spirit that we were interested in initially. This shows the roof structure with a series of three simple gabled volumes that are somewhat like the decks, loosely arranged on top of, but sort of delicately resting on top of the boardwalk itself. The other couple adjustments that we've made, we wanted to not have a large wall in the back to allow for a complete pass-through, a sense that from the town you can see out towards the water and vice versa. But just like the shading structures, this also uses entirely wood system and would be clad in a series of wood slats. We worked quickly with a structural engineer at Hatfield Group to help quickly size some of these beams and columns, just to know that we were on the right track and that we could still achieve what we hope is a sort of light touch to the project. I can go through, but her recommendations. We want it to be all wood. What can we do to make sure that that can withstand the wind loads and also the environment itself? There's certain marine coatings that can be used for wet use, but it's all, as you can read, wood posts and Douglas fir for the columns. The other thing to mention about this, most of the shading structures are simply for shade and don't actually shed water. The bathhouse is one exception, and areas of the pavilion we would also see as one exception that would allow for performances even if kind of drizzle comes through. So these zones highlighted in blue would be somewhat protected from direct rain. But I think that the big part of the pavilion that we're excited about is the multi-use portion of it. Certainly it has to operate as a stage in the all-important festival time of the year, but how can it also operate in an everyday use? We introduced a grandstand that kind of wraps the space of the pavilion in a somewhat jogged manner so that you create little nooks of seating for smaller groups. So you can come pick up a hamburger from the food truck and enjoy the view underneath some shade on the boardwalk. But I think that multi-use and the grandstand in particular, the grandstand's relationship to the boardwalk offers a lot of possibilities, we think. Certainly diagrammatically and every day, people can enjoy, sit, watch the water. We know it has to work in big festival mode, so to speak, where there can be viewers all on the beach, dance floor on a spacious boardwalk in that zone. But other functions, movie screenings that could be directly on the boardwalk or expand depending on the popularity perhaps of the movie, private events where you could potentially reserve space underneath for a certain period of time, or something as fun as a dance competition or a little performance. Again, using the grandstand then as a space for audiences where you look out on the boardwalk at the performance. I mean, wouldn't that be nice? You're looking out at the performance with the backdrop of the ocean beyond. So we think that there's a lot of potentials for this arrangement, which works kind of in hopefully 24/7, 365. The other aspect that we liked about the grandstand here, obviously it elevates the stage and you achieve much better sight lines. People can actually see all of the performers from the beach on all aspects or all areas of the beach. But we also know that there's a need for a storage component for other ancillary structures within the pavilion to help those events succeed, but allowing the grandstand in that section to almost discreetly tuck that space into the back of the pavilion while still maintaining that sort of airy feel underneath it. And this, of course, backs up to what we understood in the first phase to be earmarked for other development. So that kind of back face of the pavilion is not tremendously in public view. And this is just seeing that kind of same section, but from the boardwalk in 3 dimensions. The other aspect, this is a little bit tongue in cheek, but we certainly want to work with the design and the community to get to something that everybody is excited about, that generates interest, that generates traffic, whether literal traffic or electronic social media traffic. But we hope that the design of that structure can really hold the presence, of the beach and bring, the focal point at the center of the whole project together. But I think, fundamentally, it really is about, for us, the pavilion being a 365 day a year in use structure, and in very simple ways, right? And we know that using simple materials, simple construction that can withstand the environment and the elements is something that is definitely foregrounded in the presentation. But how can you use it, again, just for seating and a hot dog by the trucks, or in those all important days of the festival, how it can really set the stage for a performance and and hold the presence at the beach. I think we'll close basically on that.
Or open
or
to
open.
discussion.
Yeah, we'd love to talk more in detail about anything, answer questions, hear ideas, suggestions, and open the dialogue.
Mhm.
Well, thanks, guys. That was amazing. We really appreciate all the effort and kind of rendering that so clearly. And Daniel, it's great to know that you were down here when we saw this image in your phase 1 proposal. We recognized that there's a house being currently framed up here. We're like, wait, someone took this picture last week. We didn't know how you figured that out, but now we know you were down here. So, so what we'll do is go around to the members of the jury, starting with those who are out of the room, and let each member of the jury kind of just ask some questions or provide any general commentary. And Patrick, let's kick it off with you again, if you would.
Yeah, well, Daniel and Miloslava, I really appreciate the incredible work. I mean, I think when Trace had this idea so many months ago, like, this is kind of like the responses exceeded like our expectations tenfold. You guys are certainly obviously at the top of the list. I mean, it's a really high level architectural design, super thoughtful. It's very playful. It's everything you kind of want in a boardwalk design. So compliments on the just beautiful work. It's really inspiring to see. I don't know. I just keep thinking about how hard it's going to be to make a decision on these, Trace. Like you guys, it's like it was already a very kind of clever, great scheme, and now it's gotten even kind of more refined. I love the addition of kind of an iconic roofscape at the pavilion, because that's also something you see from the bridge when you enter. You cannot see all the way to the coast, so it's a nice marker. Some of the things that came up in our first discussion, you guys have kind of addressed nicely. Like there was a nice elegance to the perforated metal sunscreens and the bar joists, but there is obviously with the hurricane winds and just the amount of salt, some longevity issues. And I think the heavy kind of flat pergola roofs looks really kind of elegant in the design. I don't know. I don't want to just go on and say all the things I think are really wonderful about it. I think the phasing approach kind of is a smart way to do it. We have to get the boardwalk in there kind of quickly. I'm sorry, Trace. I don't know what I can ask. I think it's a wonderful scheme. Flattered to see the amount of love and attention you guys have put towards our little beach community. And I think a project like this just not only would be wonderful for the local community, but would also kind of establish a much larger presence in terms of like beautiful public spaces on the East Coast. So I think it's a great job. And I don't have anything really challenging to ask you.
It means a lot. Thank you very much.
All right, well, thanks, Patrick. Marjorie, we'll move on to you.
Yes, well, I agree with Patrick, and want to point out, first of all, thank you for all the work you've done. And without being repetitive, the grand staircase and the way that opens up to the beach, I think is, one of the highlights. I do think changing that roof line on the pavilion, gave it more architectural significance and remembering, becoming iconic. Of course, I have to give a shout out to the fact that, public art is one of your 3 pillars. I think there may be, I love the idea of having, an entrance sculpture or rotating work that can welcome people before they even get to the beach. I thought that was a wonderful concept. Finally, I love the mural design that you did. I think that doing murals on the ground in active season is can be challenging, but I think we could isolate areas to do that. But I think incorporating just the natural hues and colors into the elements was a good idea too. So thank you for all of your efforts, and we'll let the rest of the committee weigh in.
And Marjorie, just to follow up on your point, I thought the sort of ground murals I've always been enamored of places like Wynwood Walls in Miami, where you've got these rotating public murals, but to have it sort of built into the boardwalk itself and, you know, maybe it's every few years we redo it. That could be an off-season event that really drives some tourism things at a time that don't already have it, but.
Yeah, we'll have to find that intern from their office who came up with that beautiful pattern every time we do it.
I mean, that's beautiful.
Yeah, he nailed it, or she. It's beautiful, super nice.
Danny, move on to those in the room here.
I really like the all decking design of the boardwalk. That gives it so much flexibility. And just the key of getting good material will be the big challenge there. But I love the way that is all wood. We can change it. They're just a whole host of ideas you can do with those little islands. And I thought that was great. I really appreciated you guys. I didn't have to ask you about your elevations. You put all the elevations on there. And being an engineer at heart and all my career, I took my notes on all the elevations and I didn't have to ask any questions on that. That was a good presentation. And the pavilion design, I like that. The only thing we got to be sure of is there's going to be thousands of dollars worth of sound equipment on that stage. And so we have to make sure that it's covered where it's waterproof with all those people under there. And those areas going to let water come through. We just have to make sure that they're far enough away and designed so that that doesn't get on the equipment and all. But I like the rest of it there. So, and that's something to overcome. That's easy. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Yeah.
MA?
Yes, thank you all. I mean, kudos on a beautiful design, and we're so grateful to have you all involved and putting so much time and energy into this. And I think it does say a lot too that Daniel was here in person and took those photos and you all became more familiar with the area and the plantings that would work here. And so that certainly gives all of us a lot of confidence. Overall, I like the design. I think I would want to get more into like looking at the scale of it. With some models we've seen, there's a more continuous boardwalk, and yours has more, with the individual decks and piers. So I always worry about traffic flow, and is that going to create any dead ends? And so looking at things in scale helps me kind of get a feel for that flow. And I think you've incorporated a lot of things that would be great here. And, I'm a mom of young kids, so I'm someone who would really be using this. And so seeing different things that have come across from all the 35 or so presentations that we saw initially, there are all kinds of ways to activate the areas. And sometimes I think the more built in those are, the more this area isn't going to look like a ghost land in the off season. I don't know if that makes sense. And one adjacency that we've seen a few times that I like, and I think it could happen on your plan, is something about an adjacency of the splash pad area to the bathhouse area. It just kind of makes sense because there are people changing into swimsuits maybe, and then they're sandy and they're washing off, and maybe then that's not so central to this area that's more gathering, or where we might need like the gathering flex space for a larger event or whatnot. So that was just a little feedback there, now having seen so many different scenarios. But I think it's a beautiful design, and I agree with everyone else. I love the mural design that your staff came up with. I think it's really attractive and interesting and connects well with the project. And love the idea of the public art and making that a community event. I think that has gotten everyone's wheels turning in here, which would be great. Although I do like the look of those ground murals better on asphalt or concrete, I think, than on wood decking. And just like in residential design, whenever we're painting wood floors, it's kind of a headache because like you cannot walk on them for a really long time. So I start worrying about that. And it sounds like you all did do a little bit of research into that. But maybe there's a way to incorporate a little bit more of a mix of materials.
Yeah.
But thank you.
These are great comments though, and great questions for us to also kind of keep thinking about.
Yeah, the splash pad by the bath. I think it's, of course, it makes Perfect sense. I mean, this is what we talked about at the beginning. You know, we want to have a dialogue, we want to have communication, because you all know the issues at hand, you know, way better than anybody who's going to be coming in as an architect, even if they were local. So I think having seen various presentations as well, things that work and things that don't work or can be improved upon, I think is certainly we'd love to continue to talk about with.
Definitely. No, thank you.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you.
So just want to kind of bridge from Fred to MA with the comment about sort of the built-in play areas. And I think Miroslava, you mentioned kind of open-ended play. Fred, you and I have talked several times about what kind of play we could incorporate at the Boardwalk even before this project. And Fred said, you know, if you just put a big pile of sand, kids will have more fun on a hill or something than if you give them, like Miroslava, you mentioned, sort of a single-use thing. I think building that stuff in there allows more creative play for the kids. And it also, in a way, it sort of serves as kind of public art, and it doesn't look empty in the off season when there are a bunch of kids on it. So Fred, what other thoughts you have?
Well, the good thing about coming last is most of the good thoughts come out from it. I don't have to regurgitate them, but super job. I love the colors you used. Was especially impressed with the way you handled the transition from the homes to the boardwalk. I love the benches that are facing the ocean, and they were kind of a protection for the home. I just thought the whole thing was exceptionally well done. Kudos.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
By the way, I'm kind of a nut about all this kind of stuff, and I've been all over the world on the internet. And a lot of the things that I saw today, I've seen all over the world, and I've got must have 500 pictures on my phone of stuff that if y'all are end up being I'll be glad to share with you. May or may not be any good, but at least it gives you more ideas. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this is all very exciting for us, and all the comments, and kind of keep thinking about like how it could be better, how it could improve, how it could really fit the community. So thank you all very much for the generous comments and for your time and for allowing us to think about this. You know, but we've really enjoyed the experience so far.
Great job.
Just want to say well done to everybody. We're going to wrap up here in a second. For those who are watching, the next presentation will start at 12:15. So for those of us in the jury, we take a little break. We'll pause the recording and reconvene just shy of 12:15. But you know, to the FORMA team, again, really well done. We appreciate your time and all the effort, and I look forward to being back in touch with you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good week. Bye.
Sounds good. Thanks, Trace. Appreciate it very much. Well, first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to present today. We're really delighted to have been chosen as one of the finalist offices in this competition. We really appreciate the importance of this project and the potentials it has to really be transformative. So it's really exciting for us to join. So just a bit about ourselves. So as you may know, I'm Matthew Joel. I'm an associate professor of architecture at University of Virginia. And Lena and I both run our office, KUTONOTUK, which we've had going for quite a number of years, doing kind of fairly major competitions. And that started actually after we were based in practice in Europe, quite a number of years doing projects globally, very large scale projects. We moved to Virginia to start teaching and continue with our work. But so, yeah, I'm an architect. Well, I'm not licensed in the United States right now, but I'm licensed in Europe, just to be clear about that. But yes, so I can call me a designer here. I'm getting there.
My name is Lena Cho. I'm an assistant professor in landscape architecture at UVA, but also has experience in building landscapes and public spaces, both Europe, North America, as well as Asia. And that we both, of course, are, founders of KUTONOTUK. And we're also joined by Cam. Cam, do you want to say hello?
Hi, everybody.
It's Cam Fulmer. He's one of our members of our office. So a really great designer. So good. Thanks for joining, Cam, today.
We should
Okay.
share our,
Yeah, so let's get going now. We're going to go through our presentation and then we'll talk about what developments have happened. It's actually been quite a whirlwind for us since we last were in communication with you. We actually have a baby in our house now, so a new one. So it's actually been quite a long and interesting path. Fortunately, we have great family around to help and support us in this process. So let me pull up our screen and then share.
can you all see the slides? Great.
We good? Okay, great.
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, good.
There you go.
Okay, so we appreciated very much the comments that we got back from the jury after our first submission. So we looked at those very carefully and developed our proposal further from that point. And we also had a really great opportunity to reach out to various consultants in North Carolina to ask them for advice as we sort of move forwards. One of the things that we just wanted to emphasize, and maybe this was apparent in our first round submission, is that people come to, I mean, the star of Atlantic Beach is the beach. The beach is such a beautiful resource. It's an amazing thing. I mean, it is undoubtedly the star attraction. We traveled to Atlantic Beach after learning about the competition. We'd actually been to the area previously on past trips, but this is the first time we'd come down to. We met Mayor Cooper and had a chance to really look at the site and understand the conditions. And it was striking to us how incredibly rich historically the area is for McCall, and also the history along of the sites that we noticed in the bottom left-hand corner of the people that have made Atlantic Beach home for generations. So we walked around. Our daughter is actually up here in the top left-hand, top right-hand corner, and really sort of tried to understand as best as we could. As I've been told by Tim Oakley, who's we're dingbatters, which is something a term we learned from North Carolina. So we are trying our best to make up for knowledge that's local. One of the things that's really kind of important for us to emphasize at the start is we see this project as having the potential to aid in Atlantic Beach becoming really the gem. It is the gem of the Crystal Coast. And one of the things that's really essential in how we think about this project is as an anchor of linked series of plug-in public spaces and amenities. And we're really thinking about design in terms of pragmatics and efficiency, while also emphasizing accessibility and exceptional experience. So as simple as possible, but also exceptional. And that's what we strive to do in our work. So here's just an image, an overall kind of flyby of the project situated from a drone shot that we took when we were down visiting. And we'll explain this in more detail, but you can see the kind of key kind of elements. You can see the pavilion in the center, and then off to the left is the bathhouse, which is called the crossing. But we'll get into this in more detail. Another shot looking head on. One of the things that is really essential to us is accessibility, and also shading and seating, which we really began to sort of explore more deeply in the project as we went further. Yeah. So we'll start with our site strategy and come back to this image, which really was I think crucial for us to understand, is the location of the existing seawall and the importance of mitigating flood and hurricane hazards to the community. So this seawall was an essential part of our thinking, and also the location of the homes that are abutting the existing boardwalk.
So based on the guiding principles, as we mentioned before, number one, the beach is the star. So anything that can maximize the relationship between the city to the beach and boardwalk and other elements that are, accentuating the relationship is what we strive to do. Number two is keep the design simple. We understand that this is not like a huge scale of the site. So we want to maintain both the kind of intimacy of the neighborhood, but also being able to accommodate the public function for both kind of small and large events. And the third principle is develop a flexible system of plug-in spaces, in which we'll get into this. But then the idea of flexibility based on the different types of uses and seasonality is really important and the driving factor for our design, for both supporting the existing kind of usage, especially the homeowners, business owners, etc., also future developments that's going to happen around the site. So based on that, and going back to that kind of earlier photo that Matthew mentioned, the existing seawall and how that has in a way guided us, the spatial organization that kind of emanates throughout our design strategy is this kind of these 4 slides. Number one, we are going to try to assess and see if we can reuse the concrete seawall and boardwalk foundation. The seawall, as in kind of like, right now, 30-inch high kind of elevation, but also the concrete foundation underneath the existing boardwalk, the wooden side of it, we can perhaps, use those as a starting point for thinking about the boardwalk. Number 2 is elevating the boardwalk on the south side of the seawall to protect the privacy of the residents. So this is something that we'll get into. I know one of the comments asked us to elaborate on this, and we'll get into this one later. And number 3 is elevating that kind of 2.5 foot above the existing grade, simplifies the access of the boardwalk and the beach and preserves the privacy. And in terms of simplification, it really means that we can minimize the use of the railing. So there's no railing except the ADA ramps to really maximize that uninterrupted views in relationship to the ocean, but also it will reduce the cost of the project significantly. So this is the site plan and overall site plan. And at the end of the presentation for kind of appendix, we have zoomed in site plans for detail, which you can look at it. But this has several key components that we're kind of designing for. The first one is the upper boardwalk, as we mentioned, which then integrates into the lower boardwalk element. And then out of this, there are many different plug-in moments, such as the pavilion, the grove, the bathhouse, the seating elements, and so on. And all of these, in a way, kind of combined together, provides a overarching site organization for the site. And there are kind of 3 main parts. One here is the ABC Park, Alfred B. Cooper Park. And then the left is the crossing. Those 2 are the kind of main plug-in elements. And then the boardwalk that links all of these, for example, the west and then the east side of it.
So starting with Alfred B. Cooper Park, there are several key elements to it. The grove, which is a stand of live oaks that you can see on the screen. The plaza, located in the center, is a multifunctional space that can accommodate food trucks and other events, open space, but also art, exhibition of art. And also the diamond, which is what we're calling the pavilion. So in this view, kind of exo view, you can begin to see the elements in relation to each other a little more clearly. One of the really important aspects is that the grove is something that we looked at very carefully, and Lena will explain this in more detail, but as a shading element is really essential in introducing ecological systems back into the site that are natural to the area. The other part that's actually really important to point out here is the elevated nature of the pavilion. We have an occupiable roof. We find that actually one of the really exciting elements that could be to draw people and visitors to Atlantic Beach is this idea of going up and looking out over the beach and looking at events that are happening. So not only is it a performance space, but also it's a lookout. This is, yeah.
So this is the grove, and throughout there are actually these QR codes on the left side or somewhere in the screen where you can use the phone to really look around the scene. And we'll provide this PDF slide to you so that, after the presentation, you can also take a moment to look around the space. But this is one of the ways in which people will enter into the boardwalk, right? It's really a grove as a shading element, but it's also a gathering element where there will be a kind of, dedicated art display zone surrounded by the seating. This is also where we imagine a part of the historical markers to be located, which we'll explain later. But this provides kind of, a very nice framed view towards the ocean and then the boardwalk. One of the jury comments was about, the shape of the groves, how they tend to, of course, along the beach, have a gnarly kind of low to the ground spreading form. And then there are many different varieties of live oaks. So the ones that we're proposing to use is one of these two on the big pictures, which have much more upright, kind of taller form that are, not like, for example, what you see on the left side of the screen, and they'll grow taller, narrower, and also the fact that these are planted in the grid format would provide additional buffer for these trees from the wind and salt spray situation in the site. And these are also semi-deciduous, meaning they retain leaves. So, the idea of providing shade, throughout the season is also another attractive quality of having these groves.
So the pavilion, as I mentioned, has an occupiable roof. We've modified the design of the pavilion so that it can accommodate, it has a 15-foot clear height inside. We were in touch with consultants in staging and rigging consultants in Raleigh and also Wilmington to ask about this needs. And so they gave comments to us, which was really helpful in addition to the jury comments we received from you. So we've raised the height of it. And actually, I'll show you some images later, but we also looked at the transparency of the upper element. We've eliminated a large stair underneath and actually created a much more compact stair that goes up a structural element on the left side.
To maximize the view.
Maximize the view
Of the ocean.
Yeah. I won't spend too much time on the plans, but you can kind of understand that kind of stair element. There's an ADA lift, a skylight, which we think is actually nice to introduce some variability in terms of spatial conditions in the pavilion. And then also a top roof sunscreen kind of element, which you'll see in another image. Sections going through the pavilion. We've been in touch with a structural consultant based out of Raleigh and had some feedback on the design. So now we have a structural section in place. It's a waffle. This structure will be concrete, and we won't be using steel because that is essentially a road to difficulties when it comes to corrosion. So concrete and wood are the primary elements. And with the concrete piling foundation. The pavilion is 50 by 50 in dimensions, and there's a screen that comes down slightly over the edge, you can see here, which modulates light underneath, but also still provides you the 15-foot clear height space. This was a study looking from the city side towards the beach. And if you just take their vertical slats, balusters that actually form the screen along the sides, and if you rotate them slightly, then you can begin to get transparency as shown on the bottom image. So there's ways to look at it in terms of transparency and opacity of the screen. And we think this ephemeral quality could be very beautiful for just the landmark nature of this pavilion. Just a view in the space underneath. The boardwalk passes directly underneath, and then you can get an idea of some of the spaces. There's a QR code here. It gives you a 360 view under the side. We'll have it at the end as well, so you can use your phone and try it. It's actually quite interesting to have a look.
And then in addition to the grove and the pavilion, the plaza is what's also kind of completing the space in the center of the boardwalk site. The idea here is that we're going to use, again, a pretty coastal condition resistant materials such as the concrete, salt tolerant grasses, and kind of existing paver blocks. We're thinking of perhaps recycling some of these existing materials on site. And they will be kind of scattered as a different kind of pixelations, in the center of the plaza. And then the idea of these pixels in the plaza is that these are also kind of sized so that they can act as a parking spaces for mobile vendors for different event spaces. And then these materials are alternating as ground materials, and they also have a flexible use and also built-in kind of programs such as the kind of street chests, mist sprays, and so on, while also providing a space for different art displays and other functions. And going back to the multifunctionality, the park itself, for example, can host the large events, and the pavilion acting as a stage facing towards the beach. But also there are spaces between, for example, the pavilion and the grove where it can host a smaller events such as, stand-up comedian shows, for example. And then the loading access for a larger truck can also come in through the street here into the backside. And also the mobile vendors, as I mentioned, can have a kind of circulation scheme, inside to park on certain events.
So this was actually a key element. I was going to come back to this image here. This pavilion has two faces. It has a beach face and it has a grow face. So on the left here is the grow face, and this is for smaller events. That's why we rotated it about 30 degrees. And then the beach face, as you can actually use the boardwalk also as part of an extension of the stage. So it's much, much larger. So that's a really, really key element of this. Let me just keep going here.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an image of Atlantic Beach Music Festival in full swing as we see it. Again, I think it would be an amazing venue, and I think for really the contribute enormously, I think, to this continuation of the festival. But then what's also interesting is you have the rooftop view looking down on sports events and other things. And I think it just provides also a destination, which we think is quite exceptional for visitors, and a landmark. So we're going to move to the crossing. It's off to the west side of the site. So the crossing, do you want to talk about the crossing? No? Okay. So the crossing consists of two kind of key elements. One is the bathhouse, this long bar, and then also a larger kind of plaza space, right? The long bar contains bathrooms and some changing facilities for families. And the outdoor space contains a splash pad, places to sit in the sun for parents to watch the kids. There's space for mobile vendors and parking, also for food trucks if needed, some additional shade. And then on the other side of the bathhouse, we have handicap parking. We're going to introduce a bit more parking because we realize the importance of that within the for the increased number of visitors coming, and also the increasing accessibility, as well as having bicycle parking on one side, which we think would be really helpful.
And just to the quieter nature of the west side, where the parking spaces are, is also a kind of buffer strategy between the new project and the existing homes, for example, that you see here.
Yeah. We include also, there's a dune playground on the sands right in front of
There's an existing dune,
yeah. So, and then a rinse station at the end. So here's a plan view of the bathhouse. We can't go through it in too much detail, but there's men's and women's bathrooms, and then there's also some storage, and then a family changing area, which I think would be ideal for families coming there with lots of kids, and you just want to have them all together when you're, which I think is always, we appreciate that enormously. And then a shaded area for people to both access the beach, but also to sit and meet up with each other. A section running through the bathhouse. The part that's north of the seawall would be slab on grade concrete, and the part that is south of the seawall would be concrete piles. It's a wood frame structure. I think one level. It's very simple. Skylights coming in with natural light coming into the space. Just a view from the walking into where you access the bathrooms, the toilets. This is a view from one of the toilets. One of my great desires in this project was a toilet that you could see the ocean from. I actually wanted if we could have a stall, you could actually see that the ocean would be the most amazing toilet I think on the east coast of America or anywhere. So
with natural light coming in.
We have a place you can wash your hands and some urinals, I suppose, and the women's have a similar, so we could flip them around. But anyway, so this is a natural light coming in through these skylights. Yeah. A view looking towards the east, rinse station in the front, and you see the shaded area on the right here, looking down the boardwalk and the pavilion in the back. And then an overview again of the space popping out, and you can see some of the elements we described earlier, but also along one side sloping up with the crab claw was
the climbing wall.
A climbing wall along one side, which would be quite fun for kids to play around on. So this whole area is a kind of supervised safe space, but also very easy access and bringing people down onto the beach.
It's also very multifunctional as well, just like the plaza in the park, right? There are many elements where different programs can be used. So for example, vendors can park their spaces at certain locations. Sometimes people can play basketball, sometimes people can, do other things. So the overlapping of the programs and maintaining the functionality, multifunctionality is really key for both plazas and both spaces.
Yeah. We'll talk more about these steps we call the wave down here, which is in the shading in a later slide. Boardwalk. So we're going to talk about some of the elements along the boardwalk, which have developed since our last first round submission. We call the boardwalk east and the boardwalk west, these two zones. So within the whole boardwalk, we've designated and acknowledged the fact that the critical importance of shade, seating, and lighting. So in the top left-hand diagram, we're just annotating some of the areas where we're highlighting these elements. Also, the potential for art display in the bottom left-hand corner, where and how that can happen. Historical markers, we have a strategy we're proposing shortly where and how those would be placed. And then also this diagram, the bottom right, just showing basic ADA access, which is essential, bringing visitors down to the hard packed sand, which is an extension of the lower boardwalk.
I think one of the key things too about these diagrams is that boardwalk is really acting as a link among many different elements that are plugged into the boardwalk, right? So, for example, historic markers, we're thinking of, concentrating people-based markers in the grove, while the place-based markers are kind of scattered throughout the boardwalk itself in close proximity to where those places used to be. Same thing with the art display. There's a dedicated display zone in the park, but then throughout the boardwalk, because of the kind of the width of the boardwalk, different pieces can be displayed during certain events or festivals for temporarily, and then, and vice versa.
So going to the boardwalk east, this is just identifying some of the elements that you see in plan, so you can see them a little better in AXO view. We call this area the muscle mat, which is kind of a workout area, gym equipment. We have a dune garden with a shaded screen over top. This is a quiet place to sit. And then some seating and lighting markers and border planting. We'll get into that in a minute. If you go to the west boardwalk, we have a section called the waves, which is a set of different sizes and shapes of steps leading down and towards in front of the volleyball courts. We've rotated the courts 90 degrees from what they're currently positioned, so that they'll actually have the long axis so people can watch almost like bleachers looking at the side as opposed to looking at one end. I thought that would be actually for day-to-day use, might be a really effective strategy to have people engage and watch the games more easily.
So this is going back to the east side of the boardwalk, starting with the dune garden. And by the way, the both ends of the boardwalk itself meets the dunes, the existing dunes. And we think it's very important that these kind of, plug back into the existing dunes by providing similar programs like this, but also linking to the existing kind of informal trails that are part of the dunes. So this is the dune looking towards the west, and then you see the kind of the workout area as well as the pavilion. And both, for example, the upper boardwalk and the lower boardwalk on the right side. Lower boardwalk obviously is where it interfaces with the private homes on the right. But these are some of the strategies that we're going to implement in terms of how to maximize the privacy issues. So there are three typologies of spaces along the lower boardwalk that meet with the residential. So the first one is, the lower boardwalk where there are, kind of seatings on the upper side. In that case, we're going to use kind of medium level kind of height shrubs and grasses to provide that additional kind of, privacy. When there is a seating on the lower boardwalk, we'll use taller plants to provide additional buffer. And if there are areas where the entrances are to the homes, to the yard, then the width of the boardwalk, of course, widens, and then there are no seatings around there. So it's kind of combinations of the seating location strategy and then the planting strategy to really make sure that the privacy of the residences are kind of kept and maintained, while also providing, ways to minimize kind of windblown sand and slows runoff, increase the home values and so on. I think there are kind of multi-faceted benefits for creating the kind of two-tiered boardwalk systems, but also with the planting and seeding strategy.
Yeah. So keep things low and then use vegetation as well to bring value and as well as sort of, and I think that's one of our really kind of fundamental planning strategy. So this is a view looking down from one of the houses, the condos next to the boardwalk and the waves area. And we were like experimenting a little bit with the canopy or shading structures. we're thinking, okay, maybe there's a way to like actually project onto the surface of the boardwalk during different times of the day, shadows that actually have, I don't know, I heart Atlantic Beach would be a kind of fun moment, but so again, this is just some of the ways in which we're sort of beginning to understand, tools and the design kit that we can bring to the project that will actually make an exciting, bring value to the community. Another aspect we want to just to highlight is the seating and historical markers. So this is one part of the proposal. The markers, the seating itself, we are proposing, again, staying with pressure treated wood or concrete, is using fiber reinforced concrete. We have there's a company based out of Waynesboro here that does a lot of really amazing furniture work along the East Coast.
With concrete.
With concrete and very beautiful, delicate kind of work. And so, and then integrated lighting underneath the seats. Whoops. Integrated lighting underneath the seats, and then in areas where in the lower boardwalk where you're sitting, having these elements that are wrapping around the boardwalk, and we're thinking of like back painted glass with underlit with a light box. So something like that as a marker for historical markers. So this is one proposal that we're thinking of. We also really strongly believe that the historical markers that are existing already in Atlantic Beach, we should use those as well as part of the key elements. Those are old, beautiful brass markers, and that incorporating those into the boardwalk or into the other elements of the design would be really, I think, a great strategy as opposed to just everything's new. So lastly is we'll talk about phasing. So our phasing strategy is broken down into four stages. The first phase in blue or kind of purple here, depending on you read this color, is to repair and evaluate existing seawall and boardwalk and the at-grade slab. And where the lower boardwalk would be kind of have a topping concrete, and we're thinking also of a colored concrete for that colored, sort of introduce some kind of character or maybe some texture to it. And then to focus on the growth and the Alfred B. Cooper Park. I mean, that would be the first phase, lower boardwalk. And we're drawing a line here, which is the existing seawall. One of our consultants was talking to us, actually Chase Cullifer was recommending to us that north of the seawall and south of the seawall are a dividing line in some ways in the project. And so thinking about what can happen north of the seawall first would make sense. And then what south.
While waiting for the permit to come.
That's right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The second phase would be the upper boardwalk construction, which is in green here, and also this extension to the bottom, which is our it's a concrete slab going out to the hard packed sand for wheelchair access. The third phase would be to build out the bathhouse in the west part of the project. And the fourth phase would be to add the elements in yellow. I mean, they're simpler and smaller, but they would be contingent on having the upper boardwalk constructed. So that basically concludes our kind of summary of the project to date. And we, as I mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, our office, we've been around for about 10 years. We've had a number of major international acknowledgement for our projects after we left major firms in Europe. We haven't built a major project of this scale ourselves. And so we acknowledge the fact that as a jury, that if I was on the jury, I'd like to know, can you execute this project and deliver it? And so we assembled a team to work with us on this project that have proven track records in the area.
Especially in the coast.
In the coastal areas. So we've been working with Robert Massia at Scaling Design, with Chase Cullifer, the Cullifer Group, I'm sure you're familiar with, and also with Tim Oakley, who we've reached out to and met with all of these folks who serve as an executive architect on the project. So we're bringing the design vision, and then with the expertise that these our collaborators and team would bring, would assure the kind of delivery of the project on time and on budget. And that's I think that's our last is just a summary of the scenes that you can access with your phone and have a look around. It's kind of interesting to look at. I think that's pretty much that wraps up our presentation.
Very well, thank you guys. That was spectacular. Really appreciate it. And I resisted the temptation to stand in front of the camera take a picture of these QR codes during your presentation, but I look forward to walking around later. So we've got about another 15 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer, depending on questions or comments that the jury has. And what we've been doing is really just sort of going around to each member of the jury for their general comments and then questions about any specific elements that they may have. And we'll start as we have in the past with those who are zooming in. Patrick, connecting in from Raleigh, if you don't mind, why don't you kind of kick us off again?
Yeah, thanks, Trace. And thank you, Matthew and Lena and Cam. I mean, it's super impressive to see the work and the thought and the energy, the beauty that's kind of gone into this scheme. So I said this a couple of times, but it's super flattering for all of us. We're all users of Atlantic Beach. We've all kind of grown up going down there. You know, it's very like part of our lives. I think everybody on this jury, and to see the kind of excellence in design that's potentially coming here. I mean, it's flabbergasting, you know, like I'm super happy. All three of the schemes that we've seen today are really kind of beautiful and thoughtful. But hats off. I think your scheme in particular is really kind of, I mean, you guys are obviously ready to go. You have a full team in place that's complementary, you know, kind of local conditions, you visited in person. So there's I think a lot of feathers in your cap. And I'll just say, like, I don't know, I have a couple, not even questions, but just comments, because I think, you know, when we think about the schemes that we've seen, all three kind of conceptually share a similar idea of bringing program to the boardwalk. So not necessarily a boardwalk in a traditional sense of like connecting a commercial strip in between, like as a buffer between a beach, like maybe you see in the Northeast more, but actually a boardwalk as a destination. And I think the thing that kind of really was struck me, I didn't realize in the first go round, or maybe that came up in this second pass for you guys, was so while you have incorporated all of these kind of destinations, you also have, like, more so than any other project, new vantage points. So I think everyone in the first pass loved the elevated pavilion roof that's occupiable. But, you know, also reusing the existing boardwalk as a buffer and also as like a bike lane or rollerbladers, you know, it's a really kind of smart way of doubling the usability of the boardwalk for half of the cost in a way, you know, like I thought that was really kind of clever. I look forward to hearing what Fred thinks about that as well, because those are, you know, his properties that are right there around there. And the other thing I think that's a very indicative of your team is which we haven't seen before, is also the stitching together of the landscape with the architecture. So it's obviously an outdoor space with some programs, but, you know, you have an arrival kind of park or open green space, and not just always the back of a pavilion. So I think a lot of things I hadn't seen in the first round of the scheme that I thought were really quite beautiful. I wonder, kind of like a little bit, just maybe you mentioned this, but the roof, the shade structures, that materiality and construction, just wondering what that, couldn't tell if that was wood or concrete. I know you said there would be some concrete structure. You know, obviously I think with the elevator and stairs, you know, there's some cost, but I think the phasing could have kind of addressed any of that feasibility. We don't want to focus too much on that today, but just a little bit in terms of, is it all wood and concrete? I mean, concrete's where those access ramps and some of the roof structure, and then what the shade structures, the kind of playful ones, what were those made of?
Yeah, that's a great question, Patrick, and thank you for the comments. I've struggled actually a little bit with not using metal. I want something shiny. I want this to be a cloud and beautiful, reflective and shimmering, right? And you can see that in the images. And I thought, okay, can we pressure, so wood and concrete, we know this. Our consultants have all said, hey, you know, this is your material palette. Anyways, now with the global economy as it's going, stainless steel, the cost, aluminum, corrosion, I mean, and then maintenance, right? So you know, I'm thinking, like, I think for me, that addressing directly the point about the shading structure, one thing I think is really exciting is fiber reinforced concrete in terms of the strength of very thin elements. and the thinness of that would be essential. So I see that shading element, even though it was modeled as being reflective there, I would really be working first and foremost as going to a fiber reinforced concrete specialist and looking at that as a way to construct very thin elements that are also very strong and durable. So that would be a way to work. The other way potentially for the shininess element is just polished. Can polish concrete or polished, or how do we begin to look at reflectivity of materials? And that's one thing we'll be exploring a lot about how, because it may not be, let's say, we're not going to use metal as being mirror-like, but you can still develop different ways of working with light off of the materials of both wood and whether wood is rough or how it's cut, etc. So I think that's what I'm thinking about. In that shading structure would be looking at if we're not going down the road of using metal, which is to think about it as fiber reinforced concrete.
All right, well, thanks. Patrick, anything else?
No, not at this moment. No, I think you guys did a great job, and super thrilled to see your work down here. It's really exciting.
Thanks, Patrick.
Marjorie, we'll move over to you. You're on mute.
I think you're on mute, Marjorie.
Okay.
There we go.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I agree with Patrick. Wonderful presentation. I appreciate your taking the time to come visit and also assembling a local team. There are several things that I really loved about this. First of all, the elevated pavilion, as we all discussed. I love the positioning of that at an angle and how that really expands its usage. The border strategy and the tiered boardwalk was something that we haven't seen in the other presentations, and it really makes sense to keep, somehow reuse that. And it does provide, for faster traffic, slower traffic on the various boardwalks and perceived, use. I also think the homeowners, I think that strategy and the way you have the seating in certain places, but not in front of the homeowners' entrances, all of that was very thoughtful. Finally, let's see if there's anything else. I thought it was modern and minimalist and really played towards and focused on the nature, in the site, be it the Grove, Oak Grove, or the ocean and beach itself. So thank you so much. Wonderful presentation.
Thanks, Marjorie. Thanks, Marjorie. Thank you, Rich.
Thanks, Marjorie. Danny, we'll move on to you in the room here.
I like that combination of wood and concrete, using both of them together. I thought that was a great idea, and made it easy to stage too. You designed it for staging. You obviously done your homework on plants. You had the right plants for what grows, and actually not so much what grows, but what survives in this salt air down here. That's not an easy task. And the other thing is the pavilion, 50 by 50 and a blowing wind. We'd have to make sure we had that set up just right to keep equipment dry when you have a southwest wind about 10 miles an hour and it's raining. Placing the equipment would be critical to keep it dry if we had a program or show going on festival. Because one reason they're doing this is so we don't have to cancel it when it rains. So you need to be able to protect things when it rains.
Yeah, the guy holding the electric guitar needs to not get shocked.
That's right. That's right. But having seating on top, that's a home run. That's a home run, having seating on top.
And Danny's also a DJ, so he's worried about himself getting shocked under that. And May, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, my thoughts, it would be really repetitive because I think we're all hitting the same highlights on things that we like, but Definitely, I like the mix of materials. I like this idea. I mean, I love the design. It's just the simple design of the concrete benches and how those play against the wood, the upper and lower boardwalks. I love live oaks, so I'm happy to see those there. I think it's a great way to have shade without really forcing something there. I think I'd love to see, or I guess the one thing that's different, it's different than so many of the other presentations, is the placement of so much of that play area between the Crab's Claw and the bathhouse. So when I look at that, and again, this is a little bit selfish because that's a place I'll use because I have young kids and one on the way. So it feels more like sectioned off than some of the others that feel more open and continuous. And I don't know how many feet you guys are coming out versus how many feet we are allowed to come out, but this one looks shorter. The boardwalk looks thinner than some of the other models. But as far as like the pavilion, and then the design of the bathhouse, I think is beautiful, and I love how it comes out and connects to that shaded space. So I just love the landscape of the structures, and think maybe if we just could add other elements to the boardwalk, then it would really be a home run.
And I think if you combine the widths of the existing for lower boardwalk and upper one, you probably get to a width that's consistent with other things we've seen. It just looks a little different in the plans because it's in two sections, but I think combined width would be pretty similar.
Yeah, that's helpful. We were really thinking, a lot about how we have a 7-year-old daughter, and she just like runs to the beach right away and just kind of like wants to be at the surf. But we also are aware that there's a lot of strong currents there, and so that's also pretty dangerous for little kids. So having a kind of, quiet space, that is safe for them to play is also really important. So having that kind of dune play area next to the crossing, and also then the splash area. So there's a dry area. We're actually at one point, I was like, oh, why don't we put a splash area out onto the sand? And Lena was like, well, wait, that's going to make like people build sandcastles. Well, why don't you just get onto the water and build a sandcastle? There's lots of water there already.
It'll be hard to sand out.
Yeah, imagine all the wet sand getting. So anyway, so we were going through this process and trying to understand the sequence. So yeah, we kept it as a quiet kind of the next to the crossing, a kind of a quiet space where families could spend time, and then having. But yeah, we're going back to the point that we made at the start. We think our role here is to again provide amenities and spaces that are beautiful for visitors. But we also believe strongly the beach itself is the star of the show. It's the beautiful space, and it's the most of nothing can compete with the beach.
Yeah.
So
But it's also the beach environment, not just the water itself, right? There's the dune, there's a live oak, there's sand, the whole environment. How can the design, in a way, really accentuate that experience of the kind of holistic experience of visiting the beach?
That's interesting. I didn't think about that until Emma kind of said it, but the design, or Marjorie, you also said how minimal it is, but the design is second to the beach, in a good way. I mean, there's a lot of thought and activity that you guys have put into the design, but it's not like you go there and it's like, oh, look at this crazy boardwalk. It's not there. There's kind of a little bit more subtle, I think, than some of the things we've seen today.
I think that's a point actually, that we didn't want to create an amusement park
or over compete with the beach itself.
Yeah. Part of the reason why we kept it actually quite quiet, and then looking for really good moments for me, one of my favorite spaces in the entire project. One is on the pavilion, but also in the grove, in the trees, and I think the shade, that as bringing vegetation like that back to Atlantic Beach could be just spectacular. I'm an architect, and I'm super excited by that space.
Yeah.
I mean, and also the design itself is like subtle, like more subtle, because to really highlight the beach itself, but also for practical level, for practical reason, there are people living there, like right against the boardwalk, right? It's their homes, right? So we really need to kind of strike the right balance between, okay, how can we begin to provide a multifunctional public space that's really, really important to the city and for the region, but also how can we make sure that we're not creating an annoying environment for people who might be sleeping there and then like live there, right? So, that's how we are, kind of dealing with the kind of two-tier system, but also a kind of more nuanced approach to program and then the design itself. And also kind of reaching out beyond the boardwalk itself, but to the dunes, to the sand, to the kind of inside the city side, as well as the beach side.
Yeah.
And that's how we're approaching the site overall as well.
We was one part of our earlier, the first phase with the point, we actually had a carousel position there, and something could be more temporary in terms of having like a fare arrive. That could be a really great place for that, as opposed to parking all this right down on top of the on top of the beach. So so anyway, that's just a.
All right, Fred, any thoughts?
I don't think I've got any. I just the keeping the existing boardwalk. I think that would, that and the second or the south the boardwalk goes south of that. They just need to play really well together. If that's what you end up with. I mean, I think that could be nice, but it's a trick. It's a lot of surface, and how you make that really feel good and like one's not detached from the other. And I think it's important. I think that the privacy it gives the homeowners is good. Nice job.
Thank you. I think the point you're making too also is that having the lower boardwalk as concrete, gives you that option of doing, as was mentioned, I think by Patrick, is this skateboarding or roller skating, and then you have the wood part, which is for walking. So that two surface, in a way, you've already got the foundation, the slab underneath the wood that needs to be placed anywhere in the lower boardwalk. It's already set up, and it's an easy win, that one to do.
Yeah, it's also a very different feel too. You get 2 for 1, in a way. I would say like actually lower boardwalk is a lot more kind of intimate in terms of the atmosphere of the space, and then the upper boardwalk with the kind of openness to the sand beach, it's a very different types of space, right? But we want to maintain kind of like both neighborly feel as well as kind of a larger public feel, and that's where the two-tiered boardwalk system kind of brings together at the same time.
Well, one of the things too that we didn't talk about is actually that lower boardwalk. We were, thinking about it. We're really in the first round looking at the adjacent. There's a skate park that's quite close to skateboarding park, quite close to Atlantic Beach. Is that could we introduce a skateboarding park? Well, there already is a skateboarding park pretty close by, so why would you introduce another one? But maybe the idea of an incidental skate park, concrete, you could grind off edges. You could have, so then you have Suicide Hill up to on the east side, and then you coming down onto the concrete lower boardwalk, and then having even just the idea of having edges that are either metal on the edges so that they could be impervious to like grinding off of and things like that. So you could accommodate that, and so it becomes an incidental skate park as well. And that's
but away from the houses.
Yeah, I just following up on a point that Lena made about your plan being something that it's at times a very public space. But then there are other sections where it feels a little more intimate. And I think, coming into this project, I think we all have kind of preconceived notions about what this should be. And having grown up there and seen the old sort of boardwalk where it really was more of kind of amusement park, I was thinking of a really kind of active, kind of more structured space. But seeing this now, I realize the approach you've taken, and I really like bringing the ecology back to the site. And it's, our goal was actually not for this just to be a place that's busy 3 months of the year, but that gets used all year by visitors or residents alike. And some of these really kind of more quieter, intimate spaces, we have, we'll have a 65-degree day in February that, with perfect blue skies, and there aren't that many folks down at the boardwalk. It would be a wonderful time to take your lunch down there, just go sit and hang out. So this approach, I think, is flexible in that it can handle the big crowds, but also is a place you're going to want to come when it's not just a beach day.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to echo what Danny said. Great research on the plant front. A lot of what we've looking at other, it helps having a landscape architect on the team, but a lot of other people, for those of us that do gardening on the oceanfront or near it, it's, your palette is pretty limited. So I think you hit a lot of the ones that actually do work here.
Well, I was in earshot of like Lena on the phone with every single live oak nursery up and down the East Coast, contacting them all and talking about the availability and supply and various other aspects. So that was interesting.
Yeah, we do have
That's
the
your wheelhouse.
nursery, the plant, the live oak grower in line as well. But yeah.
Yeah, they're beautiful. I mean, a lot of people, think about palm trees, but they don't grow naturally here or in where we are. They kind of stop at Myrtle Beach. I mean, you can grow them. Fred has been successful growing some, but the live oaks, the only downside is they take for a long time to grow, but they are like the most beautiful vegetation I've seen. They're like giant bonsai trees. And even those knotty ones, like we have a lot of forest down there. They're just spectacular, man. They are. You could totally do a grid of the vertical ones, and you could do another grid of the super organic ones. I mean,
the vertical trees that I mentioned will react to the wind, right? So we can't tell exactly how they're going to grow,
right?
But they'll react and then have these kind of gnarly branches.
Yeah.
And I was told by the the nursery people that if we space each of them at 20-25 foot apart, then it will take about 10 years for the canopies to touch each other.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Okay,
So,
nice.
and then we can have we can get, kind of bigger trees to plant or smaller trees, depending on the budget and what we want, etc.
Yeah.
But then, that can be all up for discussion. But yeah, it's going to be, it's not going to be like a completely vertical spaces.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think one of the things too, as an architect too, and having these conversations, as we go back and forth in terms of design strategies, is understanding the kind of, planning strategies and time. It's like, this is investing. You can, as Lena was showing in the slides too, the calipers, you can get large for the large live oaks already. So they're not just like you're starting with like small saplings, like kind of growing. You actually, and then it's like but you're investing in like, this is decades long time in which grows and matures, and it's investing in the future.
Yeah. Great job.
Yeah, excellent job. We really appreciate it. Again, taking the time to come down earlier and then just, responding to our comments, just a really, really well done design and presentation. Any other comments from the jury? All right, well, again, thanks you too for the public that has been tuning in. There's about 30 of you. We will be posting some of the designs online. You'll be able to find the address of that website on our town website by end of day tomorrow. But there'll be a site that you can visit to see summaries of these designs, and then leave your comments and your thoughts that we're going to collect over the next 2 weeks, and then provide that to the jury, who will then, we're going to meet again at the end of this month, and we've got the difficult choice of trying to pick a winner out of 3 great options.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. We copied also a link to the PDF in the chat in case.
Okay.
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
All right, thanks you guys, and thanks everyone who tuned in, and a special thank you to our jury who's been putting in a lot of hours on this. I really appreciate it. It's a super exciting project. Look forward to talking about it with everybody soon. Have a good day.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.